Okay, we've got a packed schedule, so I think we'll make a start. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm very pleased to introduce our final masterclass on working with the care market, part of the Local Government Association CHIP Digital Support Programme. My name's Georgia. I'm from the LGA CHIP Digital team leading on this programme, which is funded by NHSX, now NHSTD. As always, a joy to be working with Rethink Partners, who developed a really useful tool for the masterclass today. Also a bit sad today because it is the final masterclass, of course, but hopefully it will be a really useful one to end on. Before we get to that, there's just a few ground rules. Next slide, please, Elle. So we do recommend you turn your videos off to ensure best connectivity. If you can also please put yourself on mute to avoid audio interference, that would be much appreciated. Please do hold questions until our Q&A. However, you can add them in the chat as we go along if you wish. If you do ask a question or have any comments, please do state your name and organisation. As you can see, we've started recording this webinar and we'll be sharing the recording alongside slides, materials and Q&As in an email after the event. If you wish, you can also tweet about this event online via the hashtag LGA Digital, but please be aware if you do tweet that others may not wish to feature. Next slide, please, Elle. So today we'll be covering working with the care market on expanding the use of care technology to improve quality of life, independence and workforce productivity. We'll hear real life experience from two councils who've been doing this work and sharing core approaches and recognising the need for adaptation depending on the context and aims of the work. Next slide, please, Elle. We're really lucky to have with us today Marie Spittle from Dudley Council, as well as Sajad Hussain, who's also from Dudley Council. We've also got Claire Hall-Salter, Helen Cottrell and Julie Edmonds from Telford and Wrekin Council. And additionally, we've got an extra section today looking at links across the whole programme, including a Slido poll. So please do have your phones at the ready. But first of all, Rethink Partners Claire Morris will be giving an introduction to working with the care market on care technology. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Georgia, and good morning, everybody. Lovely to have you with us this morning. It's lovely and sunny here. I hope it is with you all. So working with the care market, this is a big topic and one that I'm hearing lots of councils are interested in and are starting to do work on at the moment. And in a slight break with tradition this morning, we've produced quite an extensive tool to support this masterclass. So I'm actually going to walk us through the tool because it actually says everything that I would want to say on this topic. And thanks up front to our two councils, Dudley and Telford and Wrekin, who have been our co-production partners for this masterclass and for this tool. So a lot of what is in this tool is actually capturing the journey that they've been on and are still going on to really guide how you can work effectively with care providers, be that care homes, domiciliary home care or supported living, all sorts of other providers. To really think about how we can help them achieve a number of things through our use of care technology. So when we're thinking about care technology as councils, we obviously are very focused on the user, the resident, and how technology can support them to live independently. But we're seeing increasingly that we want to involve our care providers in this work. And there's a number of kind of reasons for that. But it might be that we want them to help that person make best use of the technology, and actually we need them to help build confidence, maybe provide a bit of ad hoc support. But increasingly we're seeing, particularly with the next generation digital technologies, we're moving away from a telecare model which goes through to a monitoring centre and is almost kind of siloed and completely separate from our work with the care market. And the tools that we're starting to put out in people's homes, in people's lives, can really help enhance and stretch that our care delivery model and have kind of real benefits for care providers if we can help them to kind of see, engage and huddle around the work that we're doing. Next slide, please, Elle. So kind of why, the big question. So why would we want to engage with care providers in this work, and also why would they want to engage with us in it? And as I said, it's absolutely everywhere I go at the moment, every council is thinking about how they engage care providers in their care technology work and offers. And there are a few drivers for this, but at the heart of this is something about the care workforce and productivity and efficiency. We are all living through a really challenging time in terms of capacity in the care market, and our care providers are either shrinking their offer, we're seeing handbacks, clients being declined, but also I think as Dudley will share, we're seeing the kind of level of risk and acuity and complexity that care providers are wanting to hold also kind of shrinking as they're struggling to get good workers. So a really important driver for this work is how the care technology can help the care provider to deliver their care more efficiently and release their workforce capacity, which obviously then helps with our capacity and our ability to place people and commission people into care. It's really important that we are thoughtful and clear about why we want to do this work in the beginning of that engagement with care providers. Next slide, please, Elle. So we've developed a kind of 5-step approach to how you might begin this work and take it forward, right from those beginnings of thinking about what this is for, what we might want to achieve, through to that early engagement, perhaps piloting, moving with your early adopters, through to then thinking about, okay, we've done this with 1, 2, 3 providers, and now we want it to be mainstream. We want it to be part of our work with all of our partners in this market segment. And so I'm just going to talk us through now kind of this tool and how it can help you. Next slide, please, Elle. So, key to this, what are your drivers, but what are theirs? And we really need throughout this work to put ourselves in the shoes of the care provider, and actually different levels of the care provider. What might it mean for a care worker? What might it mean for a manager in a care home? What might it mean for a small business owner? What might it mean for some of our kind of national providers? And thinking about it from all of those perspectives is a really important part of those first early steps of planning. Essentially, we think there are kind of 3 drivers, but there may be more. And so doing that thinking and planning up front is important. Obviously, we think that care technology can improve outcomes for people, whether they're living in their own homes with care and support or whether they're in a more residential setting. But we also know that care technology can prevent an escalation of care needs and can help people live at home for longer. So being clear about that is kind of really important. I've talked about the workforce pressures, and those can and do translate into financial pressures. And I think there's no point in having these conversations with the care market without being clear about the financial context that all of this work is taking place in. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail, because we need to think about their financial context as well as ours. But we've seen during COVID, for example, the care market really starting to innovate, and particularly use of video, prompts, reminders, some of those things to actually alleviate their own pressure. So there can be, we need to create a setting where there's a win for the resident, a win for us as councils and commissioners, but also a win for the care provider. And that is genuinely possible in this work. But we need not to be greedy as councils. We need to make sure that the benefits are shared across all. And then there's a kind of more subtle, but actually quite important driver here, which is about the wider digital maturity of our care providers. And NHS EI, Department of Health and Social Care, have been really clear now about wanting care providers to increase their use of digital tools. There's a strong focus, obviously, on shared care records and wanting the social care market to engage with that. But there is now a kind of national target over the next few years for all care providers to be operating from digital care record systems, digital care plans. Quite how that happens is yet to be set out, but actually beginning this with this type of technology can be a really useful first step into what for some possibly small businesses been running for a long time might feel an area where they're kind of stepping with some trepidation. So that wider digital skills, digital inclusion can be really important too. Next slide, please, Elle. Sorry, could I just make sure everyone's got microphones on mute, please? I can hear some page turning in the background. Thank you. So step two is actually to just understand your starting point. So again, being thoughtful about where you are. And we've developed a fairly simple matrix, but for you to actually think about across 6 key dimensions, where is your care market? Where are particular providers in terms of their digital maturity? This will help you anticipate and help them flush out where some of the challenges might be in them doing this work. So the first 3 dimensions are leadership, skills, and risk appetite. So leadership is things like, how digitally mature and confident are the leaders themselves? And again, thinking about who we are meaning when we're talking about leaders. Are we talking about national management teams, or actually are we talking about regional teams, or are we talking about the leader of a particular home or a local care provider? So finding and understanding the kind of starting point for leaders is really important. I guess the point being, don't start with an organisation where you're really struggling to get leaders around the table to think about this work. And that's in terms of your starting point, we need to work with the enthusiasts and and find our early adopters, and this tool can really help you do that. Skills, how confident are their workforce? What skills is there additional training that we might need to do? How can we help them become familiar, confident about the technology that we're planning to adopt? And risk appetite, so things like information governance, how do we sort of manage across that? But also really importantly there, thinking about the risk that they might be carrying in terms of workforce and financial risk, and really unpicking with them how what you're proposing might help address some of the risks that they're carrying and mitigate those for them. Next slide, please, Elle. Next 3 that we've picked out are capacity, digital bias, and financial investment, so the funding kind of model. So, of course, we might think that when a care provider is stretched and struggling for capacity, this is a good solution for them. And we did find with some of the work that we did as Rethink during COVID that actually when people were stretched in a crisis, they were ready to think the unthinkable and start thinking about using digital technologies differently. But not everyone will be in that place. So you may also have care providers who are really stretched for capacity and are just saying, I can't deal with this now, I've just got to get through. So capacity is an interesting one, because it could be a motivation for digital adoption, but it also might be a blocker. So really sort of sensitive conversations to be had there. Digital bias, so we've swept in there some of the things that we picked up in the last masterclass, but what's the connectivity like? What do they think the appetite of clients is? This is where you might come across some preconceptions about whether older people or adults with learning disabilities are willing and capable of taking up technology. And this is where you kind of need to be confident about your experiences of those things and really kind of push through some of those assumptions that people might hold. And financial investment and the funding. So really basic things. Who is funding the technology? Who's funding the pilot? We found, and with one of our co-production councils, that whilst the provider was really up for it, they said, I need a bit of extra staff capacity during the first 6 weeks of this to double run and to help us through. So thinking about how you want to pump prime and fund some of that up front, but also be thoughtful about the funding model longer term. Is the council going to continue to fund this longer term? Are you expecting to make savings that will cover the costs? Is there going to be a risk and gain share model? And you just need to be open in those conversations with care providers. And you may not know the answers to some of those questions. It is a pilot, it's an exploration. So having an open book approach to where the benefits and the financial benefits fall is really useful and important when you're doing this early phase work. Next slide, please, Elle. So step 3 is really about when and how you engage, but some of the thinking that you've been doing, you may already have started to engage with care providers. But a lot of the kind of common rules to engagement apply to this work, of course they do. But in doing this work, this is a journey and an exploration, particularly if you're starting to do this work for the first time. So the care providers will have questions, they'll come up with practical issues, they will probably have some great ideas about how they might be able to use technology and about how their staff might engage with it. So a really kind of open, mutual conversation is really helpful at this point. Stand in their shoes and listen and learn yourself. Particularly when you're starting this work, you will learn so much from your first early adopter work that will inform your approach to scale and roll out. So a really kind of open mindset. And you'll see from some of our co-production councils, you know, care provider on the project team, in all of the conversations, you know, just part of the team, basically planning and thinking through this work. Honest, straightforward. Yes, we might need to save some money, but we're open to seeing how that works. Or actually, we don't need to save money. This is actually about there are other drivers for this. We genuinely want to improve outcomes. We want to improve independence. So really open about what you're doing this work for. People will sniff out a rat. If there's stuff that you're hiding, it will pull it down and will break the trust. And then, you know, creating that trust between everybody in this is really important. A really good way to do that is, of course, focusing always on the resident and the benefits for them, but also focusing on the frontline care worker and care staff. They are hugely important to this, and they can sabotage as well as embrace and enhance this work. Make it easy for them, listen to their issues, respond, help, put in additional support, whatever they might need. And then moving on, how you capture the experiences, the stories, and then start to create some peer champions in your local market who can work with you on this work. Really useful. And most importantly, don't try and do this with the naysayers and the cynics. Find your proactive, up for it care providers, whatever sector they're in, and start with them. They will be your best partners, and they will help you get this moving, and then later on you can start to work with those who are perhaps a bit more skeptical or sitting a bit on the fence. And it's much more powerful to influence those people if you've got real local experience of doing it, and you've got a peer who can talk them through what it's been like, warts and all, for them. Next slide, please, Elle. So step 4, kind of in any transformation, this is not a static process. You know, do that thinking, do that strategic planning, identify needs, choose technology, ideally with the care provider, make that tech selection together if you are procuring something new for this work. Cover off all your kind of governance bases, get it out there, and then review it, and then go around that loop again. You will need to tweak, you will need to learn, and the first couple of weeks are kind of crucial, but then actually over the longer term, looking sort of 6 weeks, 8 weeks out, is the tech still being used? What's happening once the people have become comfortable with it? And so just constantly going around that review and iteration loop as a dynamic process is really important. And finally, step 5, next slide, Elle. So once you have, thanks, Elle. Once you have kind of started this work, how do you mainstream it? How do you start to build it out? And how do you sustain it? And there's a lot of kind of different moving parts in this. But some really important lessons from our councils around procurement and the technology procurement, and how you do that well up front to make sure you can scale and sustain it longer term. And we've just linked back to a previous Rethink LGA product on procurement at this point. Funding, at the heart of this issue is the question, who pays? Who pays for the technology? Who owns the technology? Who's responsible for supporting and updating it? All the things that we have to cover with our normal tech offers, and being open and transparent about that, working that through. And it is different for different sectors, I would say. So supported living model, care home model, domiciliary care model, the funding and financial models behind that and how you make sure everyone gets a benefit are different, connected to whether you're purchasing care in a block or on a fixed price, or can reduce hours. So some thoughtfulness, but not rocket science, around a different model, funding model for the different market sectors is really important. Evaluation, impacts and benefits tracking. So we need to know that this has worked. We need to know what it's like for staff, what it's like for the user. We need to track the capacity benefits. All of that needs to be set out up front. It's really will be important for you if you want to scale this to make your case for investment back to the council longer term. But it's also important for us to know whether it's worked and we've achieved what we wanted to achieve. And developing a framework that allows the unexpectedness to emerge as well is really important, because it may not achieve what you thought it wanted to achieve, but it may achieve something entirely different. Again, during COVID, some of the video rollout work we were involved with, we really thought it was about connecting people to services, but what we found more importantly was that it was about connecting people to friends and family and social networks, and that enhanced their well-being and sustainability, as much as connecting to services. Capture the stories as you go along and make sure you're capturing it from different perspectives. So we have staff case studies, manager case studies, as well as user, carer, family case studies, and commissioning, really thinking hard about then. So this is something we want as part of our core care offer in our place. How do we build that into market intentions, commissioning frameworks, into our contracts? How do we pick up the nuance about whether we want them to provide their own technology, whether we want them to use ours? And thinking absolutely upfront about data at this point, because the data is where the prize is, and making sure that you as the council will have access to user data to support care assessment, reviews, but also longer term planning and commissioning, so you can aggregate the data. So some, again, not rocket science, but some things to really pay attention to, and engaging commissioning colleagues in this work up front, really important. And finally, governance. This is the thing that slows us down every time, and that can actually stop projects that seem on track. So really pay attention to governance, and particularly GDPR implications, privacy, consent, all of those pieces. Right, that's a whistle stop through. The tool is available on the LGA Rethink Partners digital platform, but I'm now going to hand over to Marie from Dudley, who's been leading the work there. Marie Spittle's the Head of Service Access and Prevention, but she's also the Technology Lead for Adult Social Care in Dudley. So hopefully Marie will bring to life everything that I've just kind of been capturing. Marie, over to you.
Thanks, Claire. I'm just going to talk you through our journey of working with the care market around the digital collaboration. So, morning, everyone. Next slide, please, Al. We started to work with My Improvement Network around Rita. This is Rita. It's reminiscence interactive therapy activities. Next slide, please. So we chose Rita to start to work with the care home markets, and that was to provide digital support. So I'll talk you through some of the outcomes that we achieved with the care market through the use of Rita. Next slide, please. With regard to just some background, within Dudley, we had a standard residential and nursing home rate. And what we found was that placements were reducing when we were trying to look to home someone with dementia or complex challenging behaviours. Providers were requesting enhanced rates to provide support, and alongside that, additional one-to-one support payments. So in 2018, we started to work in collaboration with My Improvement Network, and that was to provide RETA systems to a pilot group of care homes to try and show the benefits of that digital reminiscence within the sector. We chose RETA because it was being used in our Dudley group of hospitals, so we went along to actually witness the patient experience, and because of the positive outcomes that were being achieved, what we wanted to try and do was transition that from hospital to residential and nursing homes, so people who were engaging and more familiar, that the care homes could use that tool to support people within their journey. Next slide, please. So with regard to our ambitions when we set out, it was to demonstrate how technology and digital systems could help support but improve the care for people with dementia and challenging behaviours. And that was around engagement and stimulation. And that was also to be able to provide support within that care team on a cohort basis rather than on a one-to-one basis. We wanted to try and innovate the way in which services were delivered and move away from more traditional models of care and behaviours. And we felt that this would provide care teams with an alternative. But what the evaluation showed us was a much richer picture. Next slide, please. We started with awareness sessions with our social worker teams and our care assessment teams. And what we wanted to do was try and demonstrate the outcomes that could be achieved for individuals that they were working with and for their informal carers. But for, really reiterating for the organisation, we wanted to make better use of our resources. So we initially purchased 13 units back in 2018, and then once we had that initial feedback, we invested in a further 15 at that time. We didn't only make them available to residential and nursing homes, we also provided them within our dementia gateways, which was that provide day opportunities for people with dementia. We provided RETA within our Unicorn Centre, which supports people with a learning disability, within our carers hub that supports informal carers out in the community, and within Queen's Cross, which is a hub in itself, and it's a facility that supports younger people with physical disabilities, but it also hosts a range of peer support cafes and groups. Next slide, please. How did we evaluate the use of RETA? It was definitely in partnership with the tech provider My Improvement Network. Each site completed comprehensive feedback forms. Sorry, has somebody got the mic on? I've got a sound coming in my ear. So each site completed a comprehensive feedback form, and we used those to create case studies. And
Hi Marie, you're on mute currently.
Sorry about that. So in terms, did you hear about the evaluation part?
No, could you repeat it, Marie? That would be really
okay. Sorry about that. I think it was.
Don't worry.
No problem. So how did we evaluate? So it was definitely in partnership with the tech provider, My Improvement Network. Each site completed comprehensive feedback forms, and we wanted to know both qualitative and quantity data. So they reported things around falls, hospital admissions, and in terms of one-to-one support. But all sites, bar none, reported significant improvement in all areas. Next slide, please. The My Improvement Network then supported all of the homes involved in terms of developing their own journey and case study regarding RETA. And what that could be useful then was they shared that with CQC in terms of their inspection regime, and also in terms of family and social workers to understand what Rita what difference Rita had made within their care home setting. Next slide, please. So initial impact and outcomes in terms of there was a reduction in falls, the reduced need for one-to-ones. What also came back was the quality of the one-to-ones had improved. So you know, rather than a care staff sort of sitting in someone's room who'd got challenging behaviour, you know, to try and provide that regular on-site support, they were able to have more meaningful engagement and interactions in terms of some of the content that's included on Rita, and that helped that intergenerational engagement. So younger carers working with the older people and really understanding and learning more about that individual. It improved hydration and nutrition. One of our care homes gave an example of somebody who really struggled to eat, and prior to eating time they'd share sort of cooking programs, food pictures, and it actually improved that person's eating habits. It improved social inclusion by moving away from that one-to-one and being more in common areas with other residents within the home. It helped people to engage with their past, to be part of the present, and there was some really positive feedback from the care team themselves. As I said, it reduced hospital admissions and it really improved the life for residents. Next slide, please. This then drilled down into the home's experience. So we've seen the case studies, but that they really sort of work with us in terms of cost savings. Now, to be clear, we didn't interpret it as cost savings. It was more of a cost diversion. So we never took anything out of the sort of the budget with regard to residential and nursing home placements, because as you're aware, the demand for that, we were just trying to make better use of our resources. Next slide, please. So as I said, fewer hospital admissions reported across all sites. All sites fully embraced Rita, and that was with the support from My Improvement Network, who would go in and regularly train staff, retrain staff in terms of the use of Rita. We had a care home reported that they were able to meet the needs of a residents with very complex needs who transferred from a high cost placement. And what they did in terms of telling us their story was that they said, you know, we were able to do that with 5 other residents. So if we take the high cost placement fees and we interpret it that we could place these people at the standard rate, all in all, we saved £165,000 per annum. Something that we didn't anticipate was the reduction in resident safeguarding incidents. So that was around people being engaged and having that interaction, which stopped that challenge for the staff and for the people within the home. As I've already touched on about the quality of one-to-one, but there was also less requests for one-to-one support. There was another care home who said we were able to continue to support somebody with when their condition had deteriorated, so they'd become more complex and more challenging. But rather than saying we can no longer meet the needs through the use of Rita, they could meet those ongoing needs rather than asking for the social worker to reassess and the person moving placement. And they interpreted that saving as £20,000 per year. So it was definitely in partnership, and that initial cost per resident was £176.60 as a one-off cost, and it supported a total of 265 residents. Next slide, please. So pre-COVID, the project enabled all sites involved to improve the outcomes for the residents, but more importantly for their family as well. What carers said to us was that Rita enabled them to have meaningful interactions with their loved ones, where sometimes they struggled. And so that meant that there was greater sort of feedback and interactions from those informal carers. The homes described Rita as a tool in their toolbox, one of many, but that they could switch those interactions and activities on very quickly when required. So understanding and knowing more about the person and what interests them, you know, sung at their wedding, favourite artists, westerns, you know, TV programmes. So they got to know that resident much more, and so it ensured more person-centred planning and well-being, and was at the forefront of care decisions. We then planned to roll out Rita to all our care settings in Dudley. We had awareness sessions face-to-face at a local venue, and to start to really engage those care teams. Next slide, please. And then what we've all gone through was the pandemic, so that hit us, so we didn't get to the rollout. Next slide, please. But what we found in COVID, we're working in a different space now, and you know, care providers and the care home market, you know, they've looked at Rita, they've used Zoom to interact with relatives. We're all using team calls. They've invested on, you know, in online medication records and ordering systems. We invested with iPads, but they've also invested with iPads to connect to loved ones, FaceTime via people's phones. And I think, you know, if we looked at our own technology, we're definitely working in a different space now. And if you think about smart lighting, Ring doorbells, just in terms of how everything's took off. And our social work teams, you know, looking at the way they deliver services, so virtual assessments and reviews, interacting with homes and the managers through team calls. So, you know, we've all moved in this digital space, which I think is a positive for the work that we want to try and achieve. And use of WhatsApp, I think we're all parts of groups, and Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. I think, you know, in the pandemic we saw sort of care homes, you know, whether it's on the local news and what they were doing in terms of their residents. I think we sort of all probably learnt to cook something new, do different exercises and develop our hobbies and interests. So I think that really gives us a good platform to work from. Next slide, please. The lessons learned for us, looking back, we started out as it being a local authority priority, as opposed to being that shared priority with the market and providers. Did we engage with the right people in the care homes? You know, there's a transitioning, there's turnover. Should we have gone more to owners, the boards, leadership teams in the first place, and then work with the care teams and managers on the ground? I think we all talk about our pilots. How often do pilots deliver sustainable and widespread change? And it's a question, I haven't got the answer. Commissioners were out the loop. You'll meet Sir Jad today. He's one of our lead commissioners, but should have we involved our quality and safety officers in the home and working with the home, with them, with social workers? And we didn't build any incentives into the pilot. The opportunity for care providers was to receive Rita and free training and refresher training, but did we miss a trick there? And that's another question that we need to ask ourselves. Next slide, please. So we've now started to re-engage with our care homes. We've recently held virtual events with them. We asked them around the timing of events to make sure we increased engagement, you know, avoided winter pressures and, you know, in terms of them coming out of lockdown and things, we worked with them to say when is best for you. We involve commissioners. Rethink were there to support us, but we also heard the stories within the event and the impact that Rita could make from care home managers themselves. They signed up to deliver the event with us, which was a powerful message. We reinforced our expectations and opportunities, going back to those cost-effective placement, quality of one-to-one support. So we reminded people about what we wanted to achieve with them in terms of outcomes for individuals and next steps. But we didn't want this to be just Rita. Bearing in mind we'd had the pandemic, people moving into the digital space, we wanted to use the event to engage more widespread around tech adoption and the opportunity to work with us. Next slide, please. This was part of the event, and it was probably the understatement of the year, that they'd had a particularly difficult time. You know, we all know care staff became people's friends and family, and the connection to friends and family, and all the emotions that go with that. They were also, they had to manage the constraints within care homes and all that backlash, no visitors. So, you know, but what we wanted to say, okay, we understand the difficulties, but come on, let's now use this as an opportunity to work together, support each other and see what's possible. Next slide, please. So our offer was to support them and the team to move forward. I don't think any of us think going backwards is an option. I don't think we'd all want to drive around our boroughs and cities in terms of attending meetings. Yes, there will be a proportion of that, but you know, we want to be kinder to the environment and making best use of our time. That will be the same within care homes. So we want to build on innovation to deliver services. We want to develop new care models and care pathways with our providers. Next slide, please. And what comes with that innovation and technology, and that's what we were saying at our engagement events, is investment. So we saw the difference that Rita could make to individuals and care teams, and we wanted to invest in that. Claire's touched on, you know, in terms of this being a priority now in terms of care homes and their care records, digital care records, share care records. NHSX, they're looking at funding streams to work with us with care homes to explore the possibilities. So we use the event to say, any interest to explore this space with us, you know, talk to us. And I think it's what Claire's saying, those that are interested, harness it, see what can be achieved. So we're looking at things like our provider portals, so providers can submit invoices electronically, raise queries, as opposed to being inundated with sort of paper and old and antiquated systems. But we're also looking at things like marketplace and brokerage. So, you know, the whole caboodle, not just the tech that can make a difference in terms of care teams, that's important to us, but their whole setup really, and we want to work with them in terms of what can be achieved. So that's our story up to date in Dudley. So can I hand over now to Claire and our colleagues in Telford and Wrekin. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Marie. Just to introduce ourselves from Telford and Wrekin now. I'm Claire Hall-Salter. I'm a Service Delivery Manager for Service Improvement with a particular lead for digital transformation. And my colleagues, Julie Edmond and Helen Cottrell, who put the cameras on as well, will be joining me in talking about our journey in Telford and Wrekin with home care providers and the implementation of the Smart Hub initiative. If I could have the next slide, please. So a little bit of context around Telford and Wrekin. We're a small unitary authority, small but perfectly formed, we like to say. Population around 180,000. This is due to rise to around 200,000 by 2030. We've got approximately 36,000 adults aged 65 plus, of which 7,500 are aged over 80. This is projected to rise 55% for over 80s by 2031. So where once Telford and Wrekin was seen as a very young population, we are now looking to be a much older population in the coming years. We've got around 3,700 adults who are on long or short-term services, 2,000 of those on long-term services. There's quite different socio-economic differences across the area. We have rural areas, urban areas, and some areas are in the most deprived nationally. So quite differing populations and demographics across Telford and Wrekin. In terms of life expectancy, we are worse than the national average. And quite a key fact is that 86% of people aged 85 and over report that they suffer from a long-term health problem or disability. So we have 3 local NHS providers for acute, community and mental health, and we're part of the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin formation of the ICS. In terms of our home care and residential care, we have approximately 900 people in home care services and around 500 in residential. Okay, so the pandemic, Marie talked about the pandemic that's affected us all. It really has helped with our digital transformation journey in Telford and Wrekin. We have recently gone through the use of the TSA LGA diagnostic tech tool to really put a robust programme around our digital transformation journey. Prior to that, we have accelerated, as I said, over the pandemic in terms of our case management and our financial management system all linked together. We have Live Well Telford marketplace, information and advice and directory of services linked through to our case and financial management systems. We've implemented provider portals, we've implemented e-brokerage, we have also started the journey to implement our citizens portals as well. So seamless journey for both our residents and also our providers. During the pandemic, we were also very proud to launch our independent living centre and also our virtual smart house. We've got the link there for later for the slide. And we are now fully up and running with our shared care record with the health and social care partners. Next slide, please, Elle. So in terms of our Home Care Smart Hub initiative, which we're talking about today, just to say it is early days. We are on a journey of discovery at the moment, and we've learned lots of lessons along the way. Our key strategic drivers for the initiative, very much working with our home care providers, obviously workforce pressures. We wanted to work together to look at the pressures and look at how we could alleviate some of that. So really was very much a key driver. Promoting independence for our residents, along with our vision, delivering better outcomes for our residents, which nobody can argue with. This is absolutely one of the key drivers for our Smart Hub initiative. We're also on a journey of culture change, so changing our approach of our workforce, with our partners and the community in terms of their expectations of adult social care. We are a cooperative council in Telford and Wrekin, which means co-production is really, really important to us. Everything that I've talked about already in terms of our digital transformation journey has been co-produced with our residents, with family members, with carers, with our experts by experience, and our Smart Hub initiative is no different. Helen will talk a little bit more about that when we come to her slides. In terms of this specific pilot and initiative, we really wanted to look at what we can do to prevent hospital admissions or readmissions, and also to aid hospital discharge. Again, an important strategic driver for us and for our partners. So what are we trying to achieve particularly with the Smart Hub initiative? So we want to work with our residents and our home care providers to enable the delivery of care remotely by using this Smart Hub digital device to offer an alternative to, or indeed to complement, the physical care call by a care or a health provider or professional. And as I said earlier, it really is early days. Next slide, please, Elle. Thank you. So the project itself and what we've been learning along the way. So probably around 6 to 8 months ago, I would suggest now, time moves on quickly, we had the initial idea of looking at the introduction of smart hubs. So Helen managed to organise a demonstration with many providers showing us the bright and shiny products that were available with no strings attached. And this demonstration was also attended by our DAS, our Director of Adult Social Care, and our leadership team as well. And it really opened our eyes to what's out there and the art of the possible in some respect. We'd also identified that a particular cohort we wanted to work with in our phase 1 was the enablement cohort. And we felt this hadn't necessarily been done before in terms of our research across other councils, and potentially a difficult nut to crack. But we wanted really to work with those residents who, you know, this was possibly the first time that they've come into contact with adult social care. We want to aid them to regain their functional capacity as quickly as possible, regain independence after acute admission or illness. And we felt that this cohort and the use of this device would provide maximum flexibility with our provider partners as well. But also, really importantly, for us to manage the expectations of residents, family and carers, and also our partners across the health sector in terms of their expectations of using adult social care in the future. So that was a really important part of our journey with the project. I talked about our senior officer, our DAS, who was very much on board very early on, really positive in that respect. In fact, so keen that they wanted to see it implemented pretty much within a couple of weeks of seeing the bright, shiny products. So again, managing expectations. We're very, very fortunate in Telford and Wrekin that we've got wonderful cabinet member support. So that wasn't an issue, and we have a great advocate in our cabinet member to really support this initiative and help to almost sell the initiative to the rest of the cabinet. And that brings me on nicely to the funding model and our ability to gain funding via cabinet pledges as we've moved forward. So we have been successful in gaining 5 years worth of funding so that we're able to really move forward from a pilot phase into business as usual. And that funding model we looked at was to include not only the equipment in the first year and moving forward, but also additional staffing and potentially those pump priming costs for our provider. So this was secured, linked to our cabinet priorities, which is also really beneficial because of the communications that will come as part of that, heading towards the election in 2023 for our cabinet as well. Very important that everything links back to those pledges. When we were looking at the funding and the project resource, we realised very quickly that we needed to be very clear on our roles and responsibilities and to have robust governance. We are a small team, and initially this was very much on top of the day job for everybody. But having that initial project management support has enabled us to really clearly set out a programme management approach to this initiative. We have involved experts by experience right from the word go, and Helen is going to talk a little bit more about that. And we've also involved our home care providers right from the word go as well. So important that they are part of the project team, and they attend those meetings and have been very much part of the procurement of the devices and the training, etc. And again, Julie will touch upon that as we move forward. In terms of the procurement, although we'd seen lots of bright and shiny devices, it was very important that we really looked at pulling together the right specification, what was the right kit for us in Telford, for our residents, for our providers, and that we could future-proof this, because this is very much the start of that tech journey, and our procurement team really helped us with that, alongside our corporate ICT, and also on the project team. It was really important that we looked at our governance in terms of GDPR, having the right data privacy impact assessment carried out, ensuring that we had our operational colleagues as well as part of that project. We're now at the stage of looking at our performance metrics and our evaluation, and ensuring that we have captured a baseline starting point before the devices actually go in. We want to capture qualitative and quantitative information, and some of that will come from the tech provider themselves, and some of that from the residents who will be using the devices, and also from the provider. So we're all working together to produce that evaluation framework as we speak. And as you can see from the slide there, we have been out to tender, and our successful equipment provider is Ethel Care. I'm going to hand on to Helen now. If we can go to the next slide, please. No, Julie, sorry, we're going to Julie Edmonds. There we go. Thank you.
Take myself off mute. We have a dynamic purchasing system for our home care providers in Telford and Wrekin. This is essentially a framework of pre-approved providers, and currently we have 36 providers on our DPS. 95% of these are rated good or outstanding with CQC. At February this year, we had 215 people aged between 18 and 64 receiving home care, and 695 people aged over 65 receiving home care. We hold regular provider events, and these have moved to taking place online in the last couple of years, but attendance is generally good. We discuss upcoming projects with providers, and the Smart Hub was an agenda item at our provider forum on the 8th of November last year. Hands up, we didn't have 100% positive response to the Smart Hub from all of our providers. There was some negative feedback from one or two. However, we did have a couple of providers who said they were interested in working with us. The provider we chose to work with is one that we've worked with for several years. They hold a number of different contracts with us for care delivery, such as enablement care. They deliver a planned overnight care service, a bridging service. This is just to demonstrate that they're already delivering a number of different types of services on our behalf, and not just long-term domiciliary care. Now, I need to add here also that this provider is well established, rated overall good with CQC, with an outstanding rating for caring. They have an excellent internal infrastructure, which includes a manager, coordinators, senior and carers. And you will soon hear from Sue Robson, the owner of the company, on why they chose to be involved in the project. We did not and would never underestimate the value of their time they give in contributing to the project. From the outset, they were invited to the early project meetings where we discussed what we wanted to achieve and how we could do this together. Supreme helped us to understand that this was not going to save us money. For every call made via the Smart Hub, it would need a trained member of staff to make the call and have the skills and knowledge to pick up on any concerns during the call with that individual that may necessitate a physical call to them. The provider needed to develop their own infrastructure internally to enable them to participate in a way that would be as robust as possible. There would be a staff member with dedicated time on the project. They would also need the right equipment, so there is initial setup costs included in their funding proposals to support this. I just wanted to add that during this time, we were discussing fee uplifts with our home care provider market at the same time as the Smart Hub initiative was going on. So we were also having difficult conversations with that market. So this is really to emphasise the need for good provider relationships. We are in the early stages of our project, but our next step will be to involve all our other care providers in the project. We need to be thinking of care delivery in different ways. We can't keep continuing to do the same things we have already done. So I now want to introduce you to Sue Robson. We're just going to play a short video. She is our provider and she'll explain their involvement in the project. I think I was told that it was going to take, oh, here she is.
Hello, I'm Sue Robson. I'm Director of Supreme Home Care, a home care agency in Telford, and I've been asked to explain why it's been important to be involved in the Ethel project from the beginning. We're delighted to have been asked by the council to be involved in this, and I think we see it as a way of testing how we can harness and use new technology to improve the service that we provide to our clients. We see it as about being at the beginning of developing new ways of working and new ways of delivering care to our clients and testing that with them and with the council to see what works and what doesn't. And certainly for us, I think one of the reasons why we want to be involved is this is stepping into the future and testing how things will be, particularly with new technology and as new systems come on stream. In terms of the benefits of introducing Ethel, certainly we're seeing it as being perhaps a way of making or helping our clients to become more independent. They won't be receiving as many calls. They won't be receiving the calls where there is no personal care involved with them. So it's testing the boundaries of how we go about reducing those calls and bringing even further independence into clients' lives. Ethel's also going to give opportunities that aren't currently available. For example, it's a system that will allow clients to have virtual meetings with their families, perhaps us to have virtual meetings with clients and their families, and also things like the provision of exercise programs, links into care services and health services, which currently aren't easily available. So we're looking forward to testing all of these things with our clients and with council.
Thanks to Sue for that. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we have a dynamic purchasing system for our care and support providers. We shared information on the Smart Hub project at our provider forum in November 21, and Supreme were the only volunteer to step forward and volunteer. The following month, Supreme joined our project group and gave us an invaluable operational perspective that we just wouldn't have had doing the project ourselves. At the beginning of 2022, we got our procurement team involved to advise us on the best route to tender for this solution. You do need their involvement, as there's lots of tech frameworks out there, and knowing which one to choose when you don't have experiences in this area is essential. Involving our ICT team was also a key element to this project, especially when developing the service specification. They wrote in all of the technical stuff and ensuring we were buying a product that was safe and we weren't putting anyone at risk. For example, ensuring the bidder was signed up to the 14 cloud security principles. The time we took in developing the service specification was another key element to getting the product right for us. We used the request for quote procurement route and involved members of the project team for evaluation of the bids, someone from ICT, Supreme, and an expert by experience. We received 2 bids which were exceptionally close. Ethel was a successful bidder and they have been awarded a 12-month contract with the option to extend, and the contract management element will be closely linked to our project group. We're shortly going out to tender for a block home care enablement contract, where a key element will be the need to use a tech solution and come up with suggestions for expanding on the use of tech in care delivery. I'd like to stress how important it is to put the groundwork in to get this right at the start. We did get frustrated with the governance process and the time it was taking when we just wanted to go out and buy this product. We now have a really good foundation on which to build this project, and we look forward to coming back and sharing our successes with you. And I'd now like to introduce my colleague Helen, who's going to update you from an operational perspective. Thank you.
I nearly started talking without taking myself off mute. Thanks, Julie. So yeah, we've procured a device called Ethel. It's a large touch screen device that has specifically been designed for people who might not have much experience with using technology. So it's always switched on, no passwords are needed, and links into this secure portal, which allows the two-way video calls that Julie spoke about. With those authorized users, such as care providers, clinicians, family, anyone who might need to be involved in the support of an individual. It can also provide both planned and instant prompts to help remembering tasks throughout the day. And for us, that's how we're going to use it in that really kind of basic format in this initial phase. But as time goes on, we can also use other functions of the device, which will help to collect things like data around sort of vital signs, activity within the home. It can give notifications when something's out of the ordinary. What we feel is that we've procured a device that I suppose we feel confident will grow with us as an organisation. In order to support our staff and our provider staff in that shift of how we're providing services, we really need to start simple and then grow and develop so that we can start using those kind of fuller ranges of function that the device can offer us. So before we even went out to tender, we started to attend all of the adult social care team meetings, even though we decided that enablement was going to be our initial cohort. We really needed to get as much feedback and involvement as possible from all of our service areas. And by doing that, it really helped people to engage with what was going on and help us to get feedback. Do you need me to go quicker, Claire? Is that why you've popped up? So yeah, it really helped staff to embed with them that we have to think differently to traditional support. We've also got a group of experts by experience. They're very small and very dedicated, and they all use technology for one reason or another. So at an early stage, we started talking to them about why we need to do this project and how we're doing it. And when the time was right, we had an expert by experience, Mick, who became fully involved in our tender process. Have we got time for the little video? It's 30 seconds of Mick. If not, we can move on.
Yeah, go for it.
Lovely, thanks.
Did you find it beneficial being part of the tender evaluation process, and if so, was it an easy process to be involved with?
It was a very easy process to be involved with, and yes, it was very beneficial because it kind of means that somebody who is an end user has some input at the very early stages of this process. The project itself was very good and very easy to be involved with.
Fab, and Mick's just been absolutely engaged with the whole process all the way through, which has just been fantastic. Operationally, we've developed process maps. We've done that in line with our business system support, with our frontline workers from the hospital discharge team. We've weaved contingencies into that because we know things won't always go to plan. So hopefully we've kind of thought of different eventualities and have backup plans in place. Our next step over the next couple of weeks is around training for all of the staff that will be involved in the implementation of the project. At that point, over the next couple of weeks, but also engaging with our health colleagues who support the hospital discharge process. We need them to be aware of how adult social care are developing our offer so that those conversations can happen with individuals and their families as early as possible. Again, around those sort of expectations of what will happen next for people. And in the longer term, if we're hoping we'll make a really great impact within this enablement period, so that we can scale up quite quickly and expand both to more enablement care providers, but also to start looking at those longer term packages of care. So sorry, rattled through the last little bit there. And then I think Claire's just got one last slide if we've got time for it.
Yes, do present the last slide, Claire.
Come off mute. Thank you. Just to go through, I mean, it's just a summary really of a few points to note for those other authorities that are embarking on such a project. It will always take longer than you think. We have been thinking about this for some time, but to go through every stage and have a robust governance and project management approach, it will take longer, but it's worth it. Involve your procurement team right from the start. They're really helpful with the market engagement and also maximising social value from your tender. As I said earlier, plenty of bright and shiny things out there, so really understand what it is you want to achieve and stick to that in the spec. Involve your experts by experience throughout. As I said, that is really, really key. Involve your providers very early and keep them on board throughout the project. Get senior manager and member buy-in early, but manage their expectations, and that is an ongoing task. Work closely with your communication colleagues, internal and external focus. That really helps with a cultural change, not only for our own workforce, but with our providers, our partners, but also the community. And work with health colleagues and the tech providers. What we have seen is perhaps a lack of join up on some of these initiatives. For the benefit of the residents, we really would like to see tech providers working together to provide technology equipment that can be used to meet the needs of the resident, whether that is via a health route or via a social care route, but we all need to work together for that one aim. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our presentation.
Lovely. Thanks, Claire, Helen and Julie. That was brilliant, and to Marie as well. We've totally blown the time, but it was fascinating, so I've let it run. Sajad, if you could just join us as well. Sajad is a colleague of Marie's, and Marie unfortunately couldn't stay, so I'm just going to do a really quick fire 2 or 3 questions. So there's some kind of practical things in the chat. Claire and I have shared your email and Marie's email in the chat, if that's okay, to request for that, so that anyone can follow up. But Sajad, just some questions about why you didn't roll it out to all homes from the start, and what were some of the barriers at the beginning?
So initially, we chose to actually work on the basis of a pilot to capture data around the effectiveness of RETA, and to use that information for further funding. It's difficult to say 3 F's in one go. And that was the reason behind it, essentially. And as you mentioned earlier on, Claire, and has been mentioned in other workshops as well, around actually getting buy-in, so getting the people who were the early adopters, who were interested in using technology to utilize it. The other thing is all around RETA, is the initial sort of focus on it was working with people who have dementia diagnoses. So again, the care homes that we identified were specifically around provision for dementia. So once that was achieved and success was achieved in that, we then rolled it out to the wider sort of care home market. Yep. Barriers, I guess, the same as we mentioned earlier, in terms of hesitance from care providers. What's the real reason you're doing this kind of thing? Having to build that relationship and build that trust with the providers, and getting them to take it on board. Our internal systems, I think that's another area that we're developing still, in terms of how our social workers, utilize their assessment processes and their relationships with the care providers, in terms of making sure that RETA is considered as part of the package of support that's delivered for the individual.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the key ones, really.
Brilliant, thank you. So, I mean, it was intentionally limited funding, limited scope, limited cohort, but also you pitched the willing, didn't you? Definitely.
Yeah.
And just, Sajad, I know Marie mentioned you've just kind of re-gone out with events and trying to sort of post-COVID. How's that going? Have you had new homes stepping forward, or old homes remembering they've got it and re-engaging with it? How's that going?
So yes, to both really. I think we've had new homes step forward, and it's a steady trickle. So I mean, I'm the focal point for it, and any sort of requests coming in. So I've been getting those on a regular basis. And one of the existing homes actually very keen to get more systems in, because they've seen the benefit for it. So I think it's definitely showing, bearing fruit, the second sort of engagement session that we had, and the phase 2 rollout.
Thank you. And there was a question about the sort of staff in the homes, and I know this has come up, whether you were just targeting the activity coordinators or all staff, or how that kind of worked. Could you just say a tiny bit about that?
Of course, yeah. So I think initially, in phase 1, when we rolled out RETA, and we asked the care providers to send staff to the awareness sessions and the training and so on, and they automatically sent their activity coordinators, and we sort of recognise that as an issue, really, in terms of moving forward, because of staff turnover and people moving on. So in phase 2, we've been very clear in indicating that it needs to be management level staff coming in, as well as all care staff, and not just activity coordinators. We want RETA to be available to people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that can only be managed and achieved if everybody knows how to use RETA. And as we all know around the table here, spontaneity is key. Catching the moment is key, and it's difficult to say to somebody, "Oh, hang on a second, I'll come back in half an hour with the activity coordinator and we'll do this practice with you." You want to be able to work with people at the right moment. So yeah, we've made it very, very clear, going forwards, that it will be all staff. And the other thing that we've done with My Improvement Network is we've offered a training package to the care homes. So it's an ongoing training package. So staff leave, staff come, we can send out the staff from My Improvement Network to deliver training face to face, and also My Improvement Network do monthly workshops on focusing on specific areas. So for example, life story books, or the games that are available on RETA, in order to give people opportunities to dip in and dip out and refresh.
Yeah. They're very active, aren't they, My Improvement Network? And,
yes.
It's not just in and then they're gone. They've been with you for several years, haven't they?
Absolutely. And I think that's the key. I think I did read in one of the comments where I think it's clear around the wraparound element. So it's not only the technology that's on offer, it's what the technology provider is offering us, and they've been very proactive. They've listened to us, they've listened to other organisations, and they've adapted where they've needed to adapt to make things easier, more manageable, and sort of more fruitful for the care providers, really. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sajad. And Helen and Claire, it's just in the chat, and we'll feed this to you. There's been a few requests for some things to be shared: specification for Ethel, the process maps, and a question about your kind of approach to evaluation. I don't know, Helen or Claire, if you want to just say something quickly about that.
Yeah, I'll start, shall I? In terms of, absolutely, we're happy to share our journey as we go along. So if people want to get in touch with us, that's not a problem at all via the emails. In terms of evaluation, that's kind of the stage we're at the moment. What we want to develop is a dashboard that is realistic, and potentially it will grow with us, but we want to be able to capture some baseline information that we can then test the model as we move forward, and also use to evidence the successes. But it's very much an evaluation framework that will capture the requirements from a provider perspective, from us as a council's perspective, but also from the tech provider as well, and what they can offer us, but also that qualitative information from the resident themselves, but also from the families and carers that are involved. So we're at early days in terms of actually having that framework finalised, but it's going to be quite a broad range of evaluation measures, from quantitative and qualitative measures. Helen, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that.
No, that was lovely.
Okay, lovely. Thanks to both councillors for brilliant. I'm going to just move us on, and if people could just stay with us, because we want some feedback on some things. So if you could just stay for the last 10 minutes on the call, we will whip through the last bit. Could you pop the slides back up, Elle? So just, I guess, from me and from Rethink, a thank you to those of us who've been kind of loyal attendees at next slide, please, Elle, at these sessions. And for those of you who this is the only one you've attended, just a reminder that this is the fifth in a series of 5 masterclasses. We've covered such a wide range of topics. Each of them is a whole world in and of its own, and I think we've seen that, and we've had some brilliant speakers, mostly from councils actually doing this work live, as well as some expert speakers. So if you did miss any, or you want to go back, just a reminder that there are tools, there's a recording of the masterclass, there's blogs, there's other content on the digital platform, and the links are on the slides. The slides will be shared at the end. But it's been an absolute pleasure again to work with lots of different people from across the country to pull this work together. We really couldn't do this without our brilliant network of council leads. So thank you so much to all of you. Next slide, please, Elle. And there are other things on the that were part of the programme, and they're on the digital platform that haven't been the masterclasses. So there are a series of 5 podcasts with disruptors in technology and social care. The 5th one of those is coming out soon, from Richard Smith from Kent. And just to trail that we are pulling together a support resource for councils, particularly for commissioners, around digital switch. We're working on that at the moment, and I know some of you are going to join us in some workshops to craft those tools. So there's lots out there for telecare providers and around the mechanics, but we feel that there's a gap now around councils, tech leads and commissioners, and particularly when you're trying to secure investment for transformation around digital switch. So watch this space. We will publicise that as it's coming out, likely to come out after Easter now. And just to say that there are other things all to do with care technology on the Rethink Partners main website. Next slide, please, Elle. So we've been delighted to do this work, and as always, when we do the work, we find there is more to do. And we would really appreciate if you could just take a minute now to use the Slido tool to we just want to take a temperature check on any other hot topics that might feature in future work or programmes. Ignore that digital switch over, I tested it earlier, so I put that one in. But if you could use your phones now to zap the QR code, it should take you to these questions which are now live. Just sort of no promises, but it's really helpful for the LGA and us and the NHS funders to know what are the priorities, and if there are things that are priorities that aren't on there, please pop it in the chat. It would be really helpful to know that. And Gemma has also helpfully posted the link in the chat. Going to sorry Elle, going to just hand over to Georgia to close.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everyone, for bearing with us with our evaluation trials. You should notice that some polls are just about to appear in the chat, so please do fill them out as I'm speaking. Questions around satisfaction and whether this masterclass has helped in terms of confidence. It's always really useful to hear your experience of the masterclasses. So in addition to our 2 polls, which we're just about to post, we've also got a short evaluation form, which would really help us improve in the future. It's only 5 minutes long, so please do click on the link in the chat so that you have it open when this meeting finishes. I'm also going to send that around via email, so no worries if it's getting a bit lost in the chat at the moment. The tool that Claire presented today and all of the tools from the Masterclass series are on our CHIP Digital Resource Centre, alongside the accessible recording, and the slide deck will be up there soon. If you do want to continue these discussions, please do visit the DTask network. This is a closed group for local government colleagues where you can share about all things digital. Again, I will send the link to that around in an email after the masterclass. And just before we close, 1 minute to go, a massive thank you to Rethink Partners for organising this whole series of masterclasses. We've received a lot of really useful and positive feedback, so please do continue sending that in, and we hope that you found all of the masterclasses useful. They are still up, so you can watch them all if you have missed any. Thank you, Elle, for taking us through the slides, as always, and today with the extra challenge of recordings as well. Thank you to our amazing guest speakers today, Marie, Sajid, Claire, Helen and Julie. We're so grateful to you all for giving up your time and sharing your experiences with us. And of course, lastly, thank you to all of you for attending. Please do feel free to get in touch with the CHIP Digital team. We've got our contact details on the page up there. So we do hope to see you in the future, but in the meantime, please do enjoy the rest of your day.